Thank you for listening to the Design of AI podcast. We provide secrets for how to build AI products that customers value. In this episode, you'll learn why Apple is telling the world that AI can't be intelligent. So what if LLMs can't reason? Here's how you build successful AI products. And that the latest versions of ChatGPT and Claude actually are excelling at task completion, which may lead to job losses. Please follow us on your favorite podcasting apps, and make sure to leave a review if you like this type of business advice. This episode was brought to you by PH1 Research, specializing in rapid research to discover the most valuable AI use case, as well as to test your AI concepts. You can find it at ph1.ca or reach out directly to info@ph1.ca for a free consultation. This episode was hosted by Brittany Hobbs and Arpi Drag-Figueroa. So we're coming up pretty close to our 40th episode, which is very exciting, but I think it's also a moment of reflection and a time to think back. So we originally started this podcast about a year and a half ago with the intention of being able to showcase and talk to people who were building with AI. At the time, it was really new tech. We were talking about it as a design material. But the thing is now, those are not anomalous stories anymore. And so where we want to start talking more and really focusing on is how do you deliver business value through AI?
It's true. We're hearing it over and over again. Everyone is baking AI into their products. It's undeniable. The problem we're hearing is how do we monetize it? How do we recoup the millions or billions in some cases of money we've invested into this?
Yeah, and how do you ensure that people want to use and continue using these tools?
On that path, we need to talk about some of the big news happening in the industry. And this week and last, Apple dominated those stories. They're the biggest consumer tech company in the world. But they said something that was rather shocking.
Yeah, so Apple's research team came out with a paper that basically said that the whole idea of intelligence and complex reasoning is really not living up to the hype. That we've been sold this idea that LLMs are all about complex intelligence, but that just did not hold up with their research. We heard this as well in April from Anthropic, where they were talking about how chain of thought could often, let's just say what it is, right? It would lie to us. And we're hearing the same thing from Apple. That's basically saying that these LLMs, when we give it too complex of a task, it will just give up. It will stop trying. I think a quote that's really apropos about this is one from Gary Marcus. And he said, "What the Apple paper shows most fundamentally, regardless of how you define AGI, is that LLMs are no substitute for good, well-specified conventional algorithms. They also can't play chess as well as conventional algorithms, can't fold proteins like special-purpose neurosymbolic hybrids, can't run databases as well as conventional databases. In the best case, not always reached, they can write Python code supplementing their own weaknesses with outside symbolic code, but even this is not reliable. What this means for business and society is that you can't simply drop O3 or Claude into some complex problem and expect it to work reliably."
Now, the response we've been hearing across the industry, particularly those who work very closely with AI, is so what? Gary Marcus in particular has been raising this issue for many years. Our recent guest, Emily Bender, has been raising this issue for many years. And the fact is, maybe so has Sam Altman. In a recent conference event with Snowflake CEO, he even said himself, when asked his blunt advice on how enterprises should adopt AI, he said, "The companies that have the quickest iteration speed and make the cost of making mistakes low, those are the ones that are going to win." If we decode that, it basically means don't build products that require complex reasoning. Build products that are trying to do highly repeatable, easy to quantify tasks. Not a big shocker, is it?
The whole idea of making mistakes low is really important. So if the risk is high, if the risk of getting it wrong or making it up is high, then maybe AI isn't the right tool.
And we heard that when we had Spotify's former data alchemist on almost a year ago, actually. He said that the reality is ML is a broad spectrum of different data tools. And in many respects, LLMs are quite often the worst algorithm you can employ for specific tasks.
One of the key things when you're building out an LLM-based product is start small, make it really useful, make it very singular, but also bring users along the way. Make sure that you are fundamentally creating value or creating usefulness as you go. Make it really specific and rapidly test those things.
And for the business leaders listening, the reality is it might be time to rein in some of those big ideas. The big dreams that we had a year or two ago, maybe they're not going to happen as soon as you hoped. And that's okay. Baked into those ideas are some proof of concepts that are achievable, that will have a high success rate and will have a high take-up rate. Maybe you won't monetize immediately, but as many in the VC world are saying, the competitive moat right now is getting your product out, learning, adapting, and figuring out where the true value drivers are that people will pay for. Now let's move over to Apple's other newsworthy event, which was their developer conference, which kicked off today. And shockingly, AI was not a central feature of it. After last week basically ripping the heart out of the community by saying that Apple Intelligence can't be intelligent, they relegated the AI features in the upcoming iOS updates to basically sparkle dust that helps you write messages and helps make maps better and will help Siri in some form. But Siri will remain probably the worst voice assistant in the market.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, that they did choose to still prioritize creating an AI app store where developers can create their own AI that they could then leverage within the Apple Intelligence space, but they themselves have deprioritized their effort.
The cynics in the Twitter sphere and the LinkedIn sphere will say, well, Apple basically released that paper, hyped it up to distract from the fact that they're really losing the AI battle. Now, you can also look at this from the other side, which is Apple is setting themselves up as the anti-AI AI company, the one which is focused on very singular, invisible UX use cases. And for all of us who are UX evangelists, that's great news, because it means that the AI components shouldn't be in the front of the experience. And I myself have done work for some of the biggest tech companies in terms of researching what users need and want from an AI native product. And this is aligning with what I found in my own research, which was that people don't really care if it's AI first. They just want new capabilities that shock and awe them. The features that they actually want are already found in the OS. They just can't find them because of the information architecture and the UX. So that makes the other point from Apple's developer conference even more funny in some respects, that they're redesigning the entire OS design system. And many are criticizing it, claiming that it's going to be their Windows Vista moment where they're going to regret a lot of the design choices they're making right now. But we'll see. There are several products out in market that are basically add-ons to improve your experience. One of these is Raycast, which basically takes over Apple's default Spotlight experience and creates a universal search that actually works. Isn't that great? Actually works. And maybe Apple's going to start implementing some of that themselves.
So enough of Apple. I think we've given them enough airtime. Let's talk about reasoning, but let's think about it from more of a broader feature set. Reasoning does continue to be the selling feature of tools like deep research and the so-called agentic era. This is the reason that people are paying for these pro and enterprise accounts.
Remember, they're trying to sell PhD level consultants in a box. That's the sales pitch.
In all fairness, that is amazing. And so when we think about what they're attempting to do from a reasoning perspective, it is really important for OpenAI, for Claude, for Perplexity to be really making it more consistent for these LLMs to be making an effort at inferring what you need and creating.
But let's call them what they are. Basically, the deep research product line are the frontier models of these large reasoning models, as they're called. They're where you're getting the latest edition of their capabilities and where you can see them on full display. So you're a user of OpenAI's deep research. How much better is it than their pro package and their free package?
It is infinitely better. So it not only accurately gives you information, but it will consistently quote its sources. You can click through those. It will highlight where within that source it found that information. So the credibility that you're able to have from that is very high.
But what's even better about these frontier editions of the large reasoning models are additional capabilities. So with OpenAI's, there is like a chain of thought where you can see the process through which it's thinking through the problem. And that is immensely helpful. You can start building out canvases. You can actually pull your data out so it doesn't train the core system. Now, none of this is really surprising. We've talked about this quite a bit. But what is important is the recognition that now the public at large are believing that reasoning will not be achieved. But meanwhile, these deep research tools are getting significantly better. And what they're getting better at is task level accuracy. They're not great at inferring your magnum opus, the big, great piece of art that you're going to come out with. They're not great at writing reports for you. They're not great at writing slide decks for you as much as those are new capabilities. But what they are great at, especially these new deep research capabilities, is if you give it a clearly defined task, if you train it on what success looks like, it can come up with amazing results.
I think the biggest problem is that most people aren't aware of how much better those leading reasoning capabilities are. We get very caught up in this idea of criticizing the free or the pro accounts for these deep research tools or these LLMs. And in reality, all we're doing within those testing grounds is actually training for those frontier models, those top tiers.
Hey, it's easy to criticize these tools, but every time that I criticize it, I need to remember that next year is going to get better and the year after that's going to get better. The only question is, how much are they going to charge?
Yeah, it reminds me, though, of that Black Mirror episode, Common People, where this woman is having brain deterioration and she basically goes on to a program that helps her to retain her brain functioning and memory. And the problem is that every couple of months, a new tier comes out, and to maintain the same quality of experience, they then have to increase their payments every single month. And that's sort of where we're getting to in AI in 2025. And it's a fear that I have of how do we maintain our access to these top tier models if those price points continue to accelerate.
And I've experienced this firsthand where I will be using the actual deep research tools and I will run out of credits with a single request. Can you believe that? A single request. I was trying out Manus, the new fancy deep reasoning tool. And in a single request, I exhausted all the credits that I was given as a new signup. It's crazy. But the same thing happened with OpenAI too, where these deep reasoning capabilities are so exhaustive and so expensive that you'll burn through months worth of credits, perhaps in one day.
Yeah, or they'll turn off that feature midway through your conversation.
Now, closing out this conversation about the deep research capabilities, what this looks like in terms of businesses and what you're building is don't over-index what the pro capabilities are. Obviously, these models are coming out at such a ridiculous pace that it's hard to keep up. But if you can monetize the capabilities, you can have access and actually build out something that is 100 or 1,000x more powerful. And this is one of the problems with the current proof of concept workflow, where we're trying to just get things out to market, is we're actually not leveraging the highest quality models at play.
My lens on it's a little bit different. I think, yes, we need to be building using the highest quality models when possible, but it's not always viable from a financial perspective. But what it makes me realize is that there's certain things around trust and around how do you get people to feel like they still get the value of what you're building. And in the case of something like deep research, I keep going back to this idea of, for me, it's something just as simple as that highlighting in a source gives me such a high level of trust and a sense of accuracy. There's learnings and lessons for every type of tool that's being built. You need to understand what are those most important key indicators that your users have for them to know that what you have provided is valuable, but also trustworthy for them to want to continue to explore.
Sometimes I like to think about what it's like building a retail business. People will walk into a retail business and they'll make decisions based off things you can't imagine. They'll make decisions off of the lighting. They'll make decisions off what brands you have. But the reason that you're getting the revenue is quite often because of a specific product or a specific journey that they make within your store. These AI products are very similar. You don't know when they walk in what they're looking for. You don't know where they're going to go, and you don't know how to sell them. But you need to build diagnostics and ways to evaluate and predict those behaviors. You need a relay system of some form to reinforce the capabilities that you should be building and to degrade the ones that you won't. And that's actually quite challenging. But again, if you look at it from another perspective, if you're building a product, your buyer is trying to find a reason to convince their boss that you can replace a headcount with that tool. It's a topic that we don't want to talk about much, but we're in this middle ground right now where it's obvious that these tools can replace a lot of tasks, but the hope from an executive level is they can start replacing headcount. And that's frightening because quite honestly, the expertise of humans is even more valuable now more than ever because they can spot the inaccuracies and the errors of these LLMs.
It makes me think back to this kind of old adage, working in agencies and consulting, right? You know that you're successful when your client gets promoted. And that's sort of your goal. And I feel like I constantly hear people talking about the AI tools that they use almost like they're a dirty secret. It's a thing they don't really want to admit to using because they know that it makes them better or faster at what they're doing, but are afraid that if their organization knows that they are doing it or knows the productivity gains that they're having, that it will put them at risk. So sometimes it's also just about understanding what is the thing that they're using almost in secret that helps them get promoted.
But the thing that I like to do is really investigate what the value drivers are of a product. It doesn't matter if it's an AI product or SaaS product, anything. There are usually 2, 3, 4, 5 core reasons why someone is buying. You might call them a jobs to be done, but there is a specific lever that defines success and failure for every single business. If you kick absolute ass on these 2 things, you will retain everybody you have. And if you fail miserably on those 2 things, you will lose everyone. That type of research is so valuable to do, especially before you go in and make a major investment. So when you're in that POC stage, find out what those value drivers are, because quite often these products are getting released and we're just learning. And in that learning process, if we lose sight of the purpose of the learning, we're going to end up making the same mistakes in the next iteration.
One of my favorite things to do in that kind of research is also to understand things like workarounds. How are people using a product in a way that you might not even think about and having value that wasn't really built into it in the first place? And that's where you can find those golden nuggets.
So to wrap things up today, the key things that we discussed were that Apple is a bit of a case study in what's happening in corporate America right now. They're the slow, large enterprise that's worried about regulatory frameworks. They're worried about alienating their user base. They will not release AI features until they have such a high level of confidence in their task success and that they do not harm their brand. This is what's happening out there. So if you're building for enterprise, get ready for a wake-up call unless you have a very extremely high task success rate and trustworthy rating. Conversely, startups are out there launching products that sometimes are skirting rules, quite often privacy rules. There are quite a few AI products that are actively listening and recording everything we do. There are some fantastic features coming out, but they're skirting the rules and they're doing things that regulated companies can't. The second thing we're learning about here is that the market's becoming aware of AI shortfalls. It's clear that reasoning is something that we're starting to accept won't happen. But our definition of what task replacement and perhaps workload replacement still are in place. The headcounts are dropping everywhere. There's people losing their jobs, and there are employers who'd rather have machines that might be 70% accurate than having a headcount on their budgets.
So we need to make sure that use cases are validated, that you are bringing users along the way, creating usefulness and excitement and trust, and really doing the research into those value drivers and success criteria, and also trying to identify what are the failure traps that could ultimately get you eaten by your competitors.
Again, think about opening a business where you have no idea what to sell. That's the reality today with an AI product. It might be great. You can open up that retail spot. You don't know who's going to walk in and you don't know what they're going to walk out with. That's the mentality you have to take. And you need to find every advantage to be able to monitor, track, benchmark, and optimize their behaviors along the way and reinforce that back into the system.
Happy building.